Welcome to another amazing conversation with an inspirational leader. I'm Marc Pitman, the author of The Surprising Gift of Doubt that launches today. Yay! It's no longer pre-order. And I get to talk now with Nadia Bolz-Weber, a rock star in my universe. And I know from pre-launch stuff, there are a lot of people that feel the same way. And Nadia, this whole idea was inspired by you. I don't know if I think I may have told you that. The way you did the election day with the spiritual Xanax of having somebody to talk to every hour was just, it was, I don't even have the right words to express how soothing it was to hear. I think my favorite, I don't know if you had a favorite on that day, but my favorite was your mother.
Yes, totally. My mother, it was not Brene Brown or the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, Michael Curry. Pretty much hands down, everyone's favorite was Peggy. Yeah.
That's so funny because those are the three examples when I explain to people what I'm doing today. My wife suggested I do this. It's those two and your mom that I talk about. That's great. Well,
but it was really, I did that because I needed it.
Yeah, well, and so that's a great place to start because it seems like most people say that they write, that I have been told anyway, that authors write books that they need to hear. And so I know working with The Surprising Gift of Doubt, it's stuff that I've done with clients, but it's also stuff I need to hear myself. One of the things I appreciate about the body of work that I've read and heard from you on different interviews is you have this wonderful ability to tell stories that don't just put you up on a pedestal, but they're kind of meddlesome because I start crying. Like, how did you come to be able to tell stories that aren't just, oh, look at this is something I've done, but they're invitational and inclusive?
Well, I think it's that I have a dearth of material that could possibly put me on a pedestal, and I have so much. I have so much more material where I'm sort of the spiritual anti-hero, like learning the same dumb lesson over and over. So it really is, it's a very different type of authority that to be somebody who's kind of transparent about their stuff and who, there are people who have given me flack for, I have a foul mouth and I refuse to just edit a version of myself that I think people might be more comfortable with. Like I just talk the way I talk, and some people are offended by that since I'm a pastor and they aren't used to hearing profanity in prayers and whatnot. And so sometimes I'll get messages that are like, Nadia, you're supposed to be an example. And I'm like, an example of what? Like competitive piety or an example of successfully pretending to be someone I'm not. Like if I'm an example of anything, it's an example of what it looks like to be pretty desperately in need of grace and forgiveness on a regular basis. So I generally write what I need to hear, preach what I need to hear, pray what I need prayer for,
So as you've been leading, as when you were pastoring and as you continue to pastor through the confessional and the corners and now the chapel, it sounds like, is that launching?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I filled the survey out. So as you've been doing that, how our culture is so risk averse and so vulnerability averse. It seems like we have to, like you said, competitively fake it. I have it all together. In fact, the reason I pastor a church too, as a church plant in Maine, and the reason I'm on social media is because my congregation said, what's your Facebook page? What's your MySpace page? And they were more real in social media than they were on Sunday morning. So we all came with our masks and our expectations, whatever. So have there been certain ways that you've found to be able to help people embrace almost the brokenness and embrace the mess that we don't all have it together?
Yeah. Again,
okay, good. Thanks. No, I'm just kidding.
It's just kind of the only thing I have to offer, I think. And, but the thing about vulnerability actually is kind of like trending right now. Like people want people to be like, there's just so much talk about vulnerability, but there is a difference between like transparency and vulnerability. So, I mean,
Talk about
I
that.
think
Yeah.
that I think that sometimes people mistake uh, trauma dumping for vulnerability, and that happens online a lot. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, it's I think the only way to sort of be publicly tender and vulnerable is have by having enough confidence in a way about the things that matter to be able to do it. I don't feel when I cry when I'm doing a public event, or I tear up, or I admit something kind of tender, that never feels like it is a threat to anything foundational about me. So it's in the same way that I often, if somebody uses a term I don't know, it does not bother me at all to stop them. And it could be at a live event on a panel, and I'll just go, I'm sorry, I don't know that word.
I
And
love that.
again, it's not, I have enough confidence in my intellect to feel like I don't have to overdo it. Like, it doesn't bother me to admit that I don't know something.
And is that something that you've had all your life, or is that something you've grown to be comfortable with?
That's an interesting question. I do think that I have. I mean, as you know, I'm like an Enneagram 8. You know, and we were going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Is that I think that the thing that has developed and that I have learned and increased my capacity for as I'm older, because I'll be 52 in a few weeks,
Yay.
is the vulnerability piece. It is the, like, I don't have to do everything to protect myself all the time. So I used to be if I had some kind of facade or mask that I was wearing in life, it was bravado and strength and like, you can't possibly touch me, affect me, hurt me, and I was a really competitive CrossFit athlete, and my hair was like a quarter of an inch, and I was muscly and tough and fuck you all the time. And, and I think having my heart sort of go through the meat grinder with a divorce and with, parts of my life kind of crumbling, all of that stopped working, and it then stopped being necessary. And so I even showed up to Wild Goose Festival in 2019, and this was just a couple months after my friend Rachel Held Evans died, and I was pretty stripped down from grief. And I showed up to this tent, 500 people in it, waiting to hear from me. And I just said, if you came here like hoping to hear from the Nadia of 2016, I am so sorry. She's not here anymore. Like,
Wow.
that. Yeah, so the thing I've learned isn't confidence. The thing I've learned is softness and, tenderheartedness. So.
Do you think that's something that's specific to 8, or something you've seen other personality types? Enneagram 8, for all the people that may not know. Sorry, didn't mean to throw slang around. Is something that's, I know that specifically as I've studied Enneagrams 8, that is a growth path, but it seems like there's a growth path for a lot of people that have to go through pain and kind of giving up what they've.
Yeah. I mean, part of it's just getting older, it's just, I mean, if you're not still learning difficult lessons in middle age, I guarantee you are filled with bitterness, or you're just fucking boring. Like, we should be still learning. And yet I think in our culture, it's like, oh, that's the point at which you should have just figured all the things out. And I'm like, no, I'm still learning stuff. And sometimes it's the same damn lesson.
I know. It's like the Israelites going around the mountain again. My wife and I will talk about that. Like, so we have to go around this mountain again? I thought we learned the test. I thought we passed this one. Wow.
Exactly.
That one, you were talking, I think it was in a Suzanne Stabile podcast about the helping people find their voice, and we're talking with seminary students and how much they have to borrow. They feel they, and I feel this too. Writing a book is,
Yeah.
feels vulnerable because it's your own voice and you're saying,
Hmm.
hey, I have something to offer to the world, I think.
Right.
But the I think the context was, and correct me if I'm wrong, you will, is that students were just kind of quoting everybody else, trying to
Yeah.
borrow other people's authority when they
Right.
actually had something to say for themselves. How do you help people
Yeah.
walk through that? Because that's a growth process that can be hard for people.
Yeah, it's natural though. I mean, I when I was a very brand new preacher, I would give
Mm.
my friend Sarah my sermons, and she would often give me the same advice. She'd say, Barbara Brown Taylor is not pastoring your church. You are, so you don't you have your own authority by being their pastor to speak from your experience. You don't have to borrow hers, and all it took was somebody giving me permission for that to be true in
Ah,
order for me to stop, because while there are writers out there who put things in such lovely ways, that doesn't mean it's the most pastoral thing that your congregation
hmm.
could possibly hear. So, I mean, as a preacher, when I was in my parish, I wasn't a like prophetic preacher, and I wasn't like, I don't know, expositional preacher. I was a pastoral preacher. So I would always think, I would sit down and think, what is hurting the people in those pews? I know their lives, and what is hurting them right now that maybe goes unspoken? And how can I take this text and have it speak to that particular pain? Or what is hurting me that I'm not saying out loud? I mean, I don't write sermons as much. I only write them every couple months now, but I write prayers every week that I publish. And
Hmm.
I go through the same process. I don't think of them ahead of time. I sit down on Sundays and I drink my coffee and I meditate for a bit, and then I go, what genuinely is going on inside of me? What really, not what do I want people to think I'm experiencing, not what
Yeah.
do I wish I was experiencing in my life. What is the fucking truth? And even if it's embarrassing, even if it's sad, pathetic, boring, whatever it is, I try to dig into that and I write my prayers from that place. And it's unbelievable to me how every week people comment, oh my gosh, you crawled into my head again and said what I couldn't. How do you keep saying the things I'm thinking and feeling that I don't have words for?
I know the fourth Sunday of Lent when you talked about jeans, like not sure you could fit in the jeans.
For
It's like,
sure.
get out of my closet. How did you know?
No, I have a whole closet of beautiful clothes that I don't know if I'll ever be able to wear again. I've done nothing but wear yoga pants and eat cookies. So, um, but but to but the point is like same with the Instagram live thing that I did on election day. I
Yeah.
did that because it was what I needed, and so I always just and I thought when the pandemic started and I couldn't get in the women's prison where I preach, and I couldn't be in front of people and I couldn't be around my friends, I thought I'm going to have nothing to offer in terms of writing right now because
Hmm.
I have no stimulus. There's not that other stuff coming in. And I really thought I might have to just call it quits. I'm going to have nothing. And then my boyfriend reminded me that the resource I have the most of is my ability to dig into the uglier truths of my internal landscape and use those as a way of going, I actually need prayer. I need God. I need spirituality because of those things. And even if I'm not on the road or in a parish or at the prison, I can still access that.
That's thank him for us because that's been
Yeah.
very helpful. What was the journey like choosing to leave your parish and do this more kind of incredibly pastoral calling, but in a different
Yeah.
kind of not localized way?
Yeah. Well, first of all, talking about leadership, it was
Yeah,
very important to me from the beginning that I not saddle my congregation with founder syndrome. So I was fortunate enough when I started the church to at the same time start a friendship with two people who were the second generation of leadership in a church who had taken over for founders who had stayed too long. So I
that
had
was
this
me.
caution.
I
I
was,
had,
yeah. I
yeah,
took over a building that had the founder kept hounding me all year and wondering why we didn't put his picture in the back. We didn't have Jesus's picture behind the pulpit. Why would we put this guy's picture there? But anyway, yeah, it's
wow.
horrendous. It can
Yeah,
be.
because the constellation of personality traits that allow somebody to do something like
Hmm.
successfully start a church from scratch happen to also be similar constellation of personality traits that keep people from leaving it well. So I didn't want that. And so from the beginning, I said, at some point, this church will need a pastor with a different set of skills than I have. I said it frequently from the beginning. And I hope that we have the grace to all realize that approximately the same time. Like,
That is beautiful.
and so what I did was I started, my bishop really helped guide this because
Hmm.
I was on the road too much and leading this church and needed help. And so when we called another full-time priest, an Episcopal priest, to come and serve the church, I immediately went part-time as soon as he came on. But we worked side by side for 3.5 years before I totally left. But as soon as he came
Hmm.
on, I deferred to him. People saw I respected his decisions. We eventually people saw how much we loved each other, the affection we had for each other, and so that by the time I left, I wasn't in charge of very much at all, and nobody replaced me. Reagan just stepped in to fill kind of, and so that really allowed, the thing I'm perhaps proudest of is that the church I founded is doing really well without me.
Good.
Yeah.
That
And
is a
so
testament
then,
of good leadership. Yeah, well done.
yeah, and then now we could talk for 2 hours about all of the mistakes I did make during those 10 years, which still, I'm not kidding. I'm not just saying that.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
no, I've pastored a church. I get it, and I've not been
um,
nearly as public as you. Yeah.
yeah. So, but then to walk into being like more of a public theologian, um, the thing that I have is an excellent bishop who considers me a called and sent public theologian of his synod,
Nice.
and worked for a couple years to be able to get me a letter of call as the pastor of public witness. And the ELCA hadn't done that before, and the conference of bishops of the ELCA has to sign off on that kind of thing. So
Okay.
um, so he gets that his ego is not threatened by the fact that he has a pastor, um, that he's the bishop of a pastor who's more famous and influential than he is. He's not threatened by it. He checks in with me. I check in with him. I defer to him. I mean, it's a really beautiful. I'm really grateful for that kind of leadership and authority. So yeah, so now I'm just trying to figure out how to be a pastoral voice and presence in the world to kind of whoever needs that.
Well, and they're finding you, which is it's beautiful that the Holy Spirit's bringing that paths together. One of the things that you just mentioned, though, is that he's not threatened, and so maybe as we wrap up this conversation, although I wish it could keep going forever, the threatening idea, there's threatening because of authority and leadership. So some people are just insecure, and then there's also misogyny mixed in. So how for the women that are in our middle leadership positions right now that are owning their own leadership, but they're being, whether it's a man or a woman ahead of them, are they're threatened. Are there any things that they could do to make sure that they don't get brittle,
Brittle,
get brittle
yeah.
and
Yeah.
toast, but actually replenish themselves too and grow?
Yeah. I mean, the thing I always say is that there is a sweet spot for leadership, and to me, it's never apologize for who you are. Like, don't be self-apologetic. And women are self-apologetic a lot. If you listen to it, women will apologize continually for shit they have nothing to do with. And so to not apologize for yourself, so that's one end of the space. In the middle of the space is always apologize if you're wrong or you make a mistake. Because here's the thing, other people see it. So it actually is a position of power to say it. And you do better in relationship and in terms of garnering respect if you cop to it and say it. So don't apologize for who you are. Always apologize when you're wrong, and have humility is the other end of it. So being in that space between having some humility, but not being self-apologetic, and having enough confidence to admit when you've made a mistake or you've been wrong, that's the sweet spot. If you can stay in there, then there's some protection, I think, from some of this stuff, you know?
I love that you said people see it, because I used to use the analogy that oftentimes the things that we're doing, it's like we're trying to hide behind a pane of glass. Who are we fooling? I don't know. And just because we can do this, Tabby Herring is like, Nadia and Marc. She said we're two of her favorite people. So thank you, Tabby, for watching this live stream. If you're watching this, my guest for this conversation has been Nadia Bolz-Weber. If you're watching on Amazon, her book, one of her books, Accidental Saints, is right here. Mine is over there somewhere. Definitely check out her podcast, The Confessional. How did you come up with that? Do you have a minute for that? I didn't expect to ask you that, but it's like beautiful people with really, it's a car wash for, I love the tagline that you have for it.
Yeah. Car wash
I butchered
for
it.
Shame and secrets. Well,
thank you.
I think like, there are just so many podcasts that are like, come on my podcast and promote your latest project. But I end up feeling a much deeper affection for someone when they share with me something that they're ashamed of than I am when they share with me some kind of victory in their life. And so I think that we do in this kind of cancel culture moment, to have a space where somebody is asked to speak about something they did that hurt people, and that they have remorse about, and have that held with compassion and curiosity, and then to give that person a blessing at the end for having done that and shared what they learned, how they're different, all of that stuff. That's just, it feels powerful to me. And again, that's a priestly sort of function that can be done in just the regular sort of world. So,
well, thank you so much for your generosity with your time. Thanks for the way you live your life and the way that it's empowering people to get free of the stuff that binds them. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Marc. Good luck.
Thank you.
Congrats on the book.
Thanks.
All right.